Good evening, and welcome to Real Talk, where every Sunday night we offer insight and education and resources to in-home caregivers and those affected in their world. We are talking about the children, the parents, the extended family, and all those people that are affected and impacted by in-home caregivers. And we're trying to offer an opportunity for you to learn and to grow right where you're at. And tonight, I am super excited to talk with our guest, Devon Bandison, who is also known as the Game Changer Coach. And we were just chatting right before we started and found out that we actually have someone in common. So for those of you who know Nanny Stella, we also both know Stella. And we thought that was a really fun thing that, as he said, in the world of all these people, the one person that we know is Stella, which we thought was awesome. And Devon's bio is in the feed. You can check that out. You can look out and see his projects, his credentials and things there. But in reading about him and learning a little bit about him in preparation for tonight, I wanted to bring up a couple of key points which I thought were huge in his bio. And I'm going to ask Devon to kind of tell us just a little bit about that. So first, welcome, Devon. We're excited to have you here.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Tanya. And I just acknowledge you and everybody tuning in for just wanted to learn more, and also acknowledge you for the work you're doing. I think that it's really, to me, this is the most important work in the world. So I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, I would say that our audience absolutely agrees with you. And after 35 years of working within this industry, I still love it. It's still a passion and so important to me. So I agree with you. The people that are doing this work in the home all the time, it's huge. So if you guys take a look at Devon's website and check it out, and you should, there's some really great stuff on there. You will see first, right off the bat in the About section, it says Devon Bandison is one of the most sought after personal and business coaches in the world. He works with Fortune 100 companies and people from all walks of life. And it goes a little farther into that. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really fascinating. But the part that excited me more, and that I know is going to excite our audience and the people who are watching tonight, and I'm going to ask Devon to tell us a little bit and share his insight on this part, was this part. It says, after graduation, he spent years working in the front lines of New York City. Devon worked with an organization responsible for developing behavioral health programs for youth, families, and first-time fathers in some of the toughest neighborhoods throughout the city that never sleeps. And as the director of this organization, he was responsible for the clinical and leadership development of social workers, psychiatrists, and managers in order to serve their clients. So before we kind of get into your talking points, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because to me, that direct work with people is so important and so fascinating.
Yeah, it was some of the most, continues to be, I stay connected to those types of organizations, even with my current work, because to me, I always like having my ear to the ground and also serving in the front line. So when I went in this company, I was coming out of college, didn't know really what I was doing. And we were working with what they used to call at-risk families or at-risk youth or at-risk neighborhoods. And I quickly adapted that name, and I used to call them at-hope youth, at-hope families, at-hope communities. And we'd go into the, homes, and we really work with the parents, the mother or the father and the child, ages usually between 4 and 18 years old. So it was a wide range of development. And we'd go in there. These were children with, that had social, emotional, behavioral health issues. And we'd create an action plan and go in the home and really support the family. And, what I learned in there, there was a young man named Sean in there, one of my first clients. And I remember going before I went to his home, and it was similar, before I went into his home to the feeling I had when our daughter was being born. Right before I went to the home, they had prepared me. I had read charts. I was ready to go and change the world. And I had this overwhelming fear and this thought of like, who am I to help this young man? What do I have? And I went in there, and I remember I put all the training to the side, and I asked the mom, I said, hey, can I spend some time with Sean? And Sean looked a little bewildered, and he told me, Devon, you're the first person who wanted to hear my side of the story. And with some great work with Sean and his mother, he had been truant, he had been in hospitals, and after working with him, he was back in school. He reconnected with his mother, and years later, I actually ran into Sean downtown Brooklyn, New York, and he was the first one in his family to go back and get his college degree, and he followed his dream of music and being a producer. So that work to me was some of the most meaningful work in the world, because you worked with parents who were first-time parents. I saw a need in the South Bronx for fatherhood, and there wasn't a lot of fathers in the home. So I created one of the first-time fatherhood programs for that organization that got national recognition, and that really guided my work. So there's nothing better than looking at the family as a holistic unit to me, whether the father is in the home or not. I think that working with the family unit is very important, and especially in those early developmental years of a child's life. And that's why I think your work, Tanya, and this group is so important, because you're really tackling the issues very early in the child development stages, and all through. So that was really, South Bronx. I was in downtown Brooklyn before, they renamed all of Brooklyn. And there was nothing like seeing the hope, and when I left that young man's house, I remember he thanked me and he said, "You're like the father I never had." And I thought back about, what did I really give this young man? Yeah, there was clinical skills. There was all this. And what he told me was, Mr. B, he said, "You gave me a voice when I felt voiceless. You gave me hope when I felt like there was no hope. You gave me choices when I felt there was no choices." And I think that in our work, like especially as parents or caregivers, we have all this training and certification, but sometimes the best thing we can do is listen generously and really get curious in people's world, and stop being the expert sometimes and start really connecting heart to heart. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from working in that organization.
Yeah, it sounds like that was something that really made a huge difference. And I'm already like resonating with what you're saying, because your comment about staying in touch. So, we own a training company now. I sit behind a computer most of the time
Right.
and connect with people that way. And yet I still do fill in work. I still take a client now and then, because I've still got to keep my hands on where I started and
Yeah.
what I'm doing and stay relevant in it. And I love, love, love your thing about at hope instead of at risk, that phrasing. And I do something similar in my work. Most babies, so you're a parent, you've been through the infant sleep stage, right? So
Yes.
our students are trained really well to get babies sleeping through the night in a really healthy manner. We meet all their needs, we respond to them, and we find that babies will sleep through the night organically, all on their own, when their bodies are ready to. But every baby, with only a very rare exception, around 4 months goes through a huge cognitive and physical leap. And when they have that, they get sleep disruption. It's commonly known in the parenting world and the childcare world as sleep regression.
Mm,
And I did the same sort of thing, as I flipped that over and I said, that's sleep progression.
right.
Let's focus on the positive. Let's remind parents that yes, they're a little bit sleepless right now, but it's a positive thing. It shows your baby's growing and they're developing and they're on track, and everything is right where it's supposed to be. And if we put a positive focus on it, it changes everything.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that one-on-one work, that one life that you change, is so important. And I love that. And I love that you gave that young man hope and helped change his life. That's huge. And no matter how inadequate we feel, I love your point that sometimes it's the simplest thing, just listening. That's huge. Um, Another thing that you did that was in your information is you wrote a best-selling book called
Yes.
Fatherhood is Leadership, Your Playbook for Success, Self-Leadership, and a Richer Life. Tell us about that. Tell us about your book and how those who are in our audience or those that they know could be impacted by it.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I focused on fathers because that was my early work, and when I started my business and coaching, I was working with a lot of fathers who were, CEOs, professional athletes, and they were finding that they had all the trappings of success, but they weren't making it home for dinner in time, or they felt like they weren't spending enough time, and they were missing the most important years of their children's lives. And what I started noticing is this parallel between leadership and fatherhood. And that, when I went into these organizations, there would be these leaders that were titled leaders in title, but they weren't leaders.
Mhm.
There'd be CEOs who said because of their title, they're a leader, but they weren't acting as a leader. But
Right.
I'd leave that company and I'd see the guy who cleans the floors or the woman who cleans the offices, and they'd have 5, 6 people around them. And what I realized was fatherhood, like leadership, is not about your title, it's about influence. It's
Mhm.
about how your ways and your words match up to influence people's lives, to influence your children's lives. So I wrote a book of the parallels of both fatherhood and leadership, that some of the same things that go into being a great parent go into becoming a great leader.
Mhm.
Um, and what I like to say is, does your audio match your video? Meaning, does your walk match your talk? Right. And right now we're in a generation as children grow, even at the infant stage when they can't verbalize. They're watching. They're mimicking our behavior. We're modeling behavior. And I wrote a book just to speak to fathers. And what was funny was 50% of my reviews were from women who bought the book for their significant others, but read it first and said, "Oh, these are universal." So the book are universal principles of how to be your best self and show up as a great parent. And at the end of each chapter, there's activities that you can do to really get on the court and take your parenting to the next level. And I think the principles are universal. We talk about everything from self-care to creating a vision of what you want your family and parenting to be like, to communication, and it really took off. I was grateful enough that it became a #1 new release on Amazon, and then eventually a bestseller.
Very good. That's nice. And you answered one of my questions, which was, is this a book with a universal appeal? Is it something that, whether you're identify as a father or as a mother, would you
Yeah.
benefit from this? How about caregivers?
Yeah, absolutely, caregivers. And when I think about caregivers as well as parents, one of the chapters is debunking this myth of work-life balance.
Uh-huh.
I think that it's a poorly phrased wording, and it really puts caregivers and parents at a disadvantage, because there's this assumption when you talk about balance, and I think of a balance beam. Right, a balance is when things are balanced, and
Uh-huh.
when you're being a caregiver, when you're being a parent, it's there's no like, I've worked 3 hours, so now I'm going to balance that out with 3 hours of Pilates. Then I'm going to balance it out with a walk. No, like, what I like to see is work life integration.
Uh-huh.
And with caregivers, what we talk about is it's not really balance. What it is it's like a jazz quartet,
Okay.
right? Each one of your instruments. Sometimes my instrument is I need to work a little extra hours, and that's playing the solo.
Mhm.
Sometimes my instrument is I have uninterrupted time with my children, and there's no real balance. It's not like I'm spending an hour with my son and then I have to stop and start working for an hour. But if I can integrate it like a jazz quartet where some have solos sometimes, all together it makes beautiful music. So when
Mhm.
I think of caregivers, it's like getting rid of the myth of work-life balance and looking at more as like a cup and a saucer,
Mhm.
right? So I'm from New York, so that thing under the cup, we call it a saucer. SAWCAA. For all those who don't understand my uh, my deep accent, and how I like to look at it, especially for caregivers and parents, is oftentimes as caregivers, when I work for that nonprofit, as a parent, I have all these roles, and I'm filling people. I'm serving people from my cup, and eventually my cup gets empty, and when my cup gets empty, I get overwhelmed. I'm not sleeping well, I'm stressed out, I'm reactive. And what I work with people is filling your cup. you want to fill your cup to the things that inspire you, so there's an overflow. So then now when you're serving your family, when you're serving your work, you're no longer serving them from the cup, you're serving them from the overflow on the saucer. And how you fill your cup is to identify the things that inspire you. So sometimes it could be exercise or meditation or yoga or just taking some time. For me, it's laughing with my children. We have a lot of laughter time because it fills my cup. So that's one of the things that I think is very important for caretakers, because we serve so much, we give so much out of us, but then we get depleted. So we need to find time to fill our cup so there's an overflow.
Yeah, absolutely. And caregivers, by their nature, tend to take much better care of other people than they do themselves. So I'm always telling the people that I work with and coach a lot of times is apply those same principles to yourself. Treat yourself like you would treat one of the children you're caring for.
Well, for that to happen, Tanya, and I agree, there has to be two projects I look at. One is the external project. So the external project is the actual things that you can do, block out time in your calendar, to do the things that kind of fill your cup. The internal project is challenging the unhealthy beliefs that keep you thinking like that. So the beliefs are, if I don't take care of others first and I take care of me first, somehow I'm selfish. Right? And we have to challenge that belief that actually, if I take care of myself first, I can better serve other people. I can better take care of others. So that's the internal project, challenging that unhealthy belief.
Yeah. And I think the internal is harder.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's an ongoing project.
Yeah. I mean, my husband and I, we both believe in that concept. We talk about it a lot. But we have to remind each other.
Yeah.
Where we have to say, I'll have to say, go take 15 minutes for yourself, because you've hit the point where you're empty. You got nothing left to give, and it's not pretty. Yeah. And it's not pretty when it's me either.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say, if it's not in my calendar anymore, it doesn't happen. So I need to really commit to my calendar in a way where even my pizza nights, Friday night pizza nights with my son, is in my calendar. So one of the things, is your word creates your world, and you create a world in which you put something on the calendar and it's done because you say it's going to be done. That'll translate in every other area of your life.
Yeah. And I can already see from your office that you're a man after my own heart. I keep a written calendar too.
That's right. Old school.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter how high tech our company is or what we do. Right. And the irony is that we have a tech-based company and nobody lets me touch the tech. Yeah. I am so low tech, but I have to keep a handwritten calendar. It's got to be that way, or I can't keep track of anything. I get it. So I'm really excited to talk about some of the other things. We always ask our guests to share some talking points with us, kind of their key things that they feel are important that everybody share. And one of the things that you shared with us was that fatherhood is leadership, leadership is influence. And you talked about that a little bit. But you added to that, one of the foundational factors of successful adults is having an active and present father in the home. Can you talk to us about that? And maybe aside from that, or in addition to that, a positive influence for those people who don't have a father in the home, either by choice or by circumstance.
Yeah, and I think that's a great added comment that you made, because I know that, my father was involved in my life up until 9, and then he had his own struggles, and that was my commitment. There was a promise that I made that many young fathers have that don't have an active father in their home, and the promise is the secret promise that somehow when I become a father, I'm going to be a better father than my father. But when the time comes, we have no real kind of template of how this thing works. So there's other people, whether there's coaches or spiritual leaders or people you grew up or family members in your home, that kind of become the ad hoc father of how to show you how to be a responsible man and adult. And, this is near and dear to my heart, because, all the studies have shown and research over the years that families and children with active fathers are more likely to be successful in several areas, and those with not with fathers that are not active in their life are more likely to have more negative behaviors, may end up in trouble, not graduating, not finding the levels of success and satisfaction in life, and depression. So there's a lot of studies that show the importance of father. And I think that when I wrote the book, what I started looking at was this myth of the absent father, because there's actually the research Pew study showed that there's more fathers involved in their children's lives today than any other time in history. There's more fathers changing diapers, taking children to school. So we really explore, first of all, busting that myth, but also empowering fathers to be that leader, that influence, not the only leader, because the mother is just as much a leader in the home as the father, but taking on that role and that responsibility in a different way. And I think in a different way in this year, in this day and time, is that old school paradigm of do as I say, not as I do. I'm not never vulnerable kind of leadership is kind of doesn't work anymore. So we look at fathers who are more vulnerable, who are more consistent and present, and we really dive into how can we be more present, be more vulnerable, be more honest and authentic in our relationships. And I think that I've been lucky enough to see it transform families and transform communities because of the work that the father is willing to do, that before he may just have been going with an old template of back in the day, just I show up and I'm the breadwinner and that's it. And I think it's more than just that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. It's one of those things, I mean, my husband, when we got married and we were expecting our first child, and I said, come here, you need to learn how to change a diaper. Yeah. And he's like, what? I thought I married a professional. I wasn't going to have to do this.
Right.
And I was like, no, you married somebody who's a professional at teaching parents how to do this.
Right.
You get to do it. And you know what? He ended up being amazing at it and got up every night in the middle of the night. He's the one that read to our kids every night and bathed them every night. And, he's turned out to be great.
Yeah, and the benefits are that you have a well-adapted adult. I have I have a 22-year-old who she's going to get her master's, an 18-year-old who just graduated and started college, and then a 9-year-old. And you see, their level of ability to adapt as a well-adjusted adult and deal with adversity, and also, just speak about how they feel. So I think that the studies are out there. So for me, it was very important to kind of go down that lane and really empower fathers to show up and be the best version of themselves that they can be.
Mm-hmm. And did I hear correctly at the beginning of this topic when we were talking about it, that you were sharing kind of, even if there's not a father physically present in the home, there are ways to bring that influence into a child's life?
Yeah. So there's two ways, right? There's two different scenarios, or at least two different. One is the father, the parents don't live together anymore. They got divorced, but the father's still active and outside the home. Mm-hmm. And really committing to, one of the things when my mom got divorced that I look back and I really made an impact was, as much as my father did whatever he did, she never spoke ill of him. And one of the things I speak to with divorced parents, for instance, is really making sure that you commit to not putting the other parent down and not having your child choose. The other thing is, if a father or a parent is not involved, then there's other people that can step up as being mentors. And what I suggest to single parents is, where can you find mentorship programs? Where can you find people, whether it's mentorship programs, sports programs, whatever it is in your community that can help fill that gap. And sometimes it's a family member who just steps up and says, I can be that influence on your life.
Mm-hmm. So one of the other points that you put on here, and you've already addressed this to a fair degree, but you said work-life balance is a myth that keeps parents in a vicious cycle of not enough. So we talked a little bit already about that. But can you maybe give us like a couple of tips, a couple of takeaways that people could really cling on to to kind of get a better balance there, or
Yeah.
not all the balance, but the integration.
Right. So I talked about both the internal and the external work. One
Mhm.
of the other things, and this is blasphemous coming from a guy from New York, is this thing called slowing down. Because slowing down, when we hear it, sometimes as parents, as caregivers, we think about going slow, and sometimes I'm gonna lose momentum. But the analogy I like to give is like a 10-speed bike. That oftentimes as caregivers, as a family members, when you talk about work life, we're in a 1-1 gear. So our legs are going so fast, we're on the hamster wheel, but we're not gaining any momentum. So how can we upgrade our pedal strokes to a 4-6 gear? So actually our legs are going slower, but we're gaining momentum. And that's where, I say I have parents do things like commit to creating your week the week before it happens, like sitting down on Sunday night and putting it in the calendar, creating time for you to fill your cup. Warren Buffett has a quote that says, because sometimes we use busy as a badge of honor. You go and talk to people and they're like, I'm so busy, like it's something to celebrate, or you should see my calendar, I'm just so busy. And Warren Buffett says busy is the new stupid. Like, and I like to use that because it's like, wow, right in your face. But I say that not to call people stupid, but what happens is we can't, if we don't slow down, if we don't have more intentional time to create the life and the family and the business that we want, we'll just be going fast on that hamster wheel. So a couple tips is the internal, external projects I talked about, and also really creating your week rather than just trying to get through your week, and also slowing down in order to go further.
Mm-hmm. Pardon my coffee. I was coughing
Yeah.
there. No, that's great. And it's actually something we practice in our house is every Sunday afternoon, we plan out the week. And then the last 20 minutes of every day are prioritizing the next day. And we always put the hardest thing at the top of the list.
Yep.
Because if you can accomplish that, your day feels amazing right from the beginning, and you get more done.
Yeah, and what I tell people, everybody has a to-do list, the 20-thing to-do list. I ask them to write a to-don't list. What don't you have to do today? And instead of writing 10 things that you don't get to, create 3 to 5 things each day that are your most important things.
Yep.
Because once you check those off, you biologically you get almost dopamine hits for checking something off. So it really helps you. The other thing is, there's a guy who wrote a book called Make Your Bed. And it's like, why do I need to make my bed? And it's simple because it's the first win. See, courage and actually confidence comes from, you don't wake up with confidence. Confidence comes from creating little baby wins in your day that once you achieve it, you get more confidence. So making your bed is the first win you can make. You can have each day to get that dopamine hit to say, hey, I'm moving forward. And most people ruin their day in the morning. They drop a cup, they stub their toe, and what do they say? I'm gonna have a bad day. And then what happens is they get into the traffic that they're in every day, and their brain is looking for proof that it's a bad day, and they say, see, I'm having a bad day. Then they go to that family, and the family's not in a good mood, but they're never in a good mood. And they get there, but because they said they're gonna have a bad day, they have a bad day. And what we try to do is say, we can create the day early. You drop a cup, you stub your toe, just by saying, hey, that is not going to determine my day. I'm going to create small wins in my day in order for this to be great.
Yep, I totally agree. We apply those principles in our lives every day in our house.
Love it.
So that's huge. I mean, everybody succumbs every once in a while to I'm going to have a bad day, but we are hardcore about the wins and planning our week and planning our day. And we say, these are the 3 things I'm going to accomplish today. And if we get all of them done and we choose to go on, great. But if not, so we apply all of that here. And most of that comes because my husband is so intentional and purposeful and has helped me to integrate those. And so that's one of the things I love to tell people is those things are possible. Even when you're an adult, even when you're an older adult, you can still make those positive changes that have a huge influence and shift in your life. They change so many things. So one of the other things that you talked about, and we talked about it again a little bit, but I want to maybe get another tip or two from you on this, is self-care. Because you talked about, not being able to pour from an empty cup, right? But you also pointed in your points that you said self-care and putting yourself first is not selfish. It's actually the most selfless thing you can do. Can you talk around that for a minute?
Yeah, it's funny. We know things theoretically. We've heard it before, but it's like my work is really to say, how can you? I use sports analogy. Get out of the stands where you're a fan. Short for fanatic, and everything's conceptual, and you're judging yourself and judging others. And how can you get it on the court? So we've all heard about, we take planes all the time about putting the oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. But this is a real thing that we have to address, this unhealthy belief that somehow if I put myself first, I'm being selfish. And it's actually the most selfless thing you can do to take care of yourself. So I have a morning routine, for instance, that takes about an hour and a half. So before I show up to a phone call with you or to parent, before my kids get up, I've already filled my cup so I can be the best version of myself that I can be. And to me, Tanya, there's nothing more important than that. And oftentimes our caregivers and our parents, we get that as a concept, but we have to put it into action. And you can be an owner or a victim. A lot of victim language is like, oh, I'm just trying to get through to the week. I'm just trying to get through to the end of the week. Thank God it's Friday. It's too short a weekend. And we have to recreate that and really create ownership language where we're looking forward to each day and we're being intentional with each day. And I think that that's where the self-care comes in, because nobody's coming to save you. You can spend all the money on the programs, you can spend all the money on this, but at the end of the day, it's really simple. Can you slow down and really say something and mean it? Commit to your word, because our word creates our world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Um, can you give a couple ideas around your concept of you need to stop being so busy? So we talked about that in busyness and that badge of honor, and boy, do we see that. My husband and I talk about that all the time, and the fact that we want to have dinner with friends. We love to entertain. That's our thing. And obviously, right now, nobody's doing that. But when our world is normally, and when it gets back to that, we love to entertain. And yet we hear from people all the time, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. Yeah. I can't make time for that. So for our audience, how do we give them one or two tips of how do they stop being so busy and start to prioritize? Because you and I both know relationships, whether it's our family or our friends, those relationships are important to us. And at the end of the day, at the end of our lives, that's what's going to matter more than anything else. So how do they do that?
It's funny. It reminds me of a quote. A client who worked in business once told me, he said, Devon, we spend our whole life trading our time for money, only to get to the end of our life and wish we could give the money in for more time. Mm-hmm. So where are we spending our time? So here's the number one tip for me. For your audience, people used to say they have time management problems. And everyone has the same 24 hours. And if I was to give a take home to people is you're not busy because you have a time management problem. You're busy because you have a people pleasing problem. Whoa, what does that mean, Devon? If you look at why you're overcommitted, it's because you're saying yes to the things you need to say no to. So my tip is to really prioritize the most important things in your life. People say I do so much. I travel, I got my business. I actually only do really 3 things over and over and over again, right? I spend a lot of time with my kids, which I love having time with my kids. I travel for my business, and I really serve people. And I do it over and over because those are the things that bring me the most joy. So what I've done is you won't see me hanging out in places where it just isn't fun to me. So, I created a list of what are my 3 to 5 priorities in my life. And I create my life around that. And I say no 80% of the time. And I think that that's the number one tip, because people can have the tools, different tools to manage their calendars and all that. But if you're continuing to be a people pleaser, that none of that is going to matter. So the number one tip is look at your time management or busyness issue, not as a time management issue, but as a people pleasing. Where do you need to say no so you can say yes? I remember when I was committing to a Friday night pizza night with my son because he was going through some changes. I said, I need to commit to this for 6 months. And I got a call to do a keynote. And usually keynotes are on Saturday. And it was in California. It was big money. It was the most, I was like, wow, people pay 45 minutes for that. And so they sent me the contract and I see it on Friday. And I could have gone, but I had committed. And this was the most important thing at that time. And I went back and I said, no, I'm not going to take this because, I have a family thing. And they thanked me. They were surprised. But because I committed to that, my son got the best of me. And what happened was that company called me back and they ended up sending me to a bunch of different keynotes. But I committed and said no where I needed to so I can say yes to the things that prioritize. So what I would say is really get focused. In my book, I write, how do you write a game plan and the description on what are the 3 to 5 priorities of your life and creating your life and your calendar around that rather than just saying yes and, just filling in your calendar with things that keep you busy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds to me like that has not only, just like we were talking about earlier, not only an external component, there's an internal component, and it ties right back to everything you were talking about. I love that. So is there anything else that you want to share with our audience tonight? Any other takeaways that you want to give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the 3 biggest things to me when I think about caregivers and parents is really, does your audio match your video? That, like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to, they're going to look at you as a superhero, of course, but like, let your children see your imperfections. Let them be honest about, hey, this is where this is where mommy falls short, because then they can learn how to not be so hard on themselves, that actually life is about learning from when you fall short. The second thing is really to take care of yourself and fill your sources so there's an overflow. So you practice self-care. And the third thing is to slow down in order to speed up. That busy really is the new stupid. That, like, really have to look at stop people pleasing and start creating an intentional life. And I think that if we slowly do that over time and we just move it 1% a day, instead of all or nothing. I'm going to go to work out 7 hours tomorrow. I'm going to walk. I'm going to jump. No, 1% a day. In about 3.5 months, 100 days, you'll be 100% further along on the process than you were today. So just little baby steps. And if any of your audience have questions or want to get in contact with me, you have my contact information. It's just my name. And I'm happy to be of service and answer any questions that people have.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love those points. And again, we have a very similar thing. We say that if you leave Los Angeles headed for Hawaii and your compass is off by only 1 point, by the time you get to where Hawaii should be, you're going to be so far off track. And that just moving that one little point at a time.
That's it.
Get you. It's absolutely the same thing. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's really been an honor to have you on here, to learn from you, to also kind of hear that maybe a few things, at least in my work life, we're getting right. And I love the tips that you're sharing because they're so applicable. Whether you're a father, whether you're a mother, whether you're a parent, whether you're a caregiver, whatever your role is, all of these things are applicable. And when we as individuals are better people, then the children in our care, the children that we influence, get a more positive outcome because they benefit from that. They reap all those benefits. And that's what all of us are all about in the end. Yeah. So if you have any questions for Devon, please put them in the feed and either tag him. He said you can, and you can also find him online via his name. Of course, we'll put all of his information, including information about his books and where you can find him on social media. That'll all be in the feed. But tag him or tag Newborn Care Solutions, and we will make sure that it gets to him and we get an answer. Either he answers directly or we'll get it and share it with you. But thank you for being with us here tonight on Real Talk, where every Sunday night, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, we offer real topics, real issues and real solutions. Have a great night.